Welcome to Wickerson Studios. My name is Michael Wickerson and I am building a plugin from scratch and picking through all of my C# user objects and probably some of my Python user objects. And as you can see here, I'm going through and finding my favorites within string, which are hello world, formatting strings, formatting areas, and culture info. I'm following the kind of styles of parametric camp. Have basic types from, actually I thought I inputted this one, basic data types to in and out items, data items, and dealing with items initially, and ranges of data types. And then I also am doing some complex types, which are going to move into the geometries of Python. And now I'm back into basic operators until I can fly through and get those scripts up and running. So these are all being written in the form of C#, Grasshopper templates in Visual Studio, and you'll have to put in your inputs, and most of them are all sticking to items currently, but I'm eager to get onto the list and the trees because I think that's where things get very interesting, especially for nodes that are going to jazz up scripts. When I'm all said and done this, I probably have a few hundred to make. I'll pick out the top 20, 24, maybe 2 or 3 dozen, make them into some nice icon plugins and throw them into this Jazz plugin that I can do myself. I'll probably try and collaborate with Daniel Christov. I should tell him about that, I guess. Basically, as long as you can get things set, know where to find your placeholders, variables to take in the input data and retrieving data from the data access arguments, then you can write your scripts and then you can output what you need. And everything's kind of specific here, and it's a little tedious to type it in, but as soon as you rebuild any solution, I actually have my system set up that I can hit play and jump directly into Rhino. So give it a minute. It should load up my master script, and I'll show you how I'm developing that. Try not to bug out with divisions from zeros, but that seems to happen once in a while. So getting into exceptions and hopefully figuring that out. So this should have opened up my master script. Let's see if it did. Did it? Yes, it did. So Wickerson Studios Jazz plugin, C scripting, and Visual Studio for Grasshopper. Item inputs and outputs to start, and then I'll slowly move down to list inputs and outputs and tree input and outputs. So currently I'm going through the hello world, and everything was done as user objects through the Warsaw white paper, and I'm picking the ones I kind of like. But what I do is I take one that's written in the C component, and then I go over and I write it in the Visual Studio, and then send it over here into, oops, I have to make this all enabled. Yeah, it's a little tricky with this. This one. Hang on a second. Let's just grab that all. And we'll just hit enable. There you go. You can see everything's up and running. So now, instead of being able to go in and see how things are scripted in the GH components, you cannot see how they're scripted inside the hello world, but they are running, and you have to go back into Visual Studio to figure out exactly what's going on there. But everything is up and running in that section of hello world. I've actually chosen certain ones that I want to get running in just test pieces of input data types within the basic types. I'll show a couple of those as well. Enable, and you can see that I'm really getting into some detailed formatting that I never did before in Grasshopper, but now I'm trying to find applications of it. And I still have a few others to do, but I may end up just talking about them on video tutorials. Complex type is not that complex, it's just making a point, but it does get you moving away from this type of script within this component. And of course the editor doesn't work as well as Visual Studio Editor, but you can see where you're producing the same type of thing, going back into your Visual Studio, finding your solution, going into your complex types, and there's your 3-point type structure, and shows you how you have to put up your inputs and your outputs, and then write your simple script, and then have them output set out to getting out of your code. So that's a pretty simple script, but it's nice to figure out how to work within items, and then when you get into lists and trees, it will get a little more interesting and complicated. So that's it. The basic operators is something I'm playing with now. Kind of going back into some simple tutorials here. Once again, nothing too complex, but I'm eager to check out the double conversion math round, which came from the white papers, the integer division. I do have a little bit of problems with these loading them up into this script out of Visual Studio. So I have to set I have to make sure I'm not dividing by 0 to get these started, even though I don't intend on running these. What's interesting is if I shared these GH scripts on just directly, this GH scripts, they wouldn't work for anybody because you need the solutions and the plugin to do it. So now I'm going to have to start sharing solutions and Visual Studio scripts on my Patreon for those that actually sign up. But I definitely want to walk through this, have a look at integer modulo, division, equality, assignment, increment, decrement, conditional operators, toggle switches, and setting precedents. So that's all stuff that we're going to talk about, but then I'm actually going to script it over here in Visual Studio. And that's the goal. The only other thing is, as we start to get more complex and start to pull out scripts that really rely on list inputs and outputs and tree inputs and outputs, you're going to find how complicated things get. Because even though you might be able to write trees within the C component node, you've got to learn to write that within the wrappers that are used with the GHGoo within the Grasshopper. Of course, I'm learning this weekly and right up to date with the parametric camp, but I'm trying to apply it to different scripts than the ones that are happening there. Then I'll try and apply it to Rhino Geometry through all the scripts that RaiIce have put out on a white paper. Then my own Python scripts, GH Python scripts, I'll have fun with that as well. And we'll just see where it goes. I think I have a bunch of these. They're all basic types, maybe some complex types, but hopefully I'll be able to build these kind of jazzy little, really these kind of jazzy little accessories for making certainly iterations and loops and making your geometries even more interesting. And I'll try and provide some simple stuff with that. The Dominions one that I did with Daniel Kristev, and I was excited to do that because it was a plugin that started to play off of conic solvers. You still have to solve a couple of the icons, but that just means it needs reloading from the package manager. So look forward to Wickerson Studios C# Jazz plugin coming to the package manager if I can get this done in the summer, and we'll see what happens. But thanks very much for watching. I'll go back to Visual Studio, which is kind of nice. I'll go back into my hello world. And I hope you enjoy what I'm doing. Reach out in any way you want and ask me any questions if you have it. Take care.